morning everyone, we hope you're well.
Welcome to Bridge Church Ipswich online on this lovely Sunday morning, and congratulations for surviving another week of lockdown.
You are joining us for the second part of our series called Living in Lockdown, and we're really pleased to have you with us.
So as you can see, you will be with us until approximately 10 past 11 for the first part with our life story. You'll then have the opportunity for a break, grab a cup of tea and join us for the second part of the life source at 20 past 11.
This second part, Life Source, will take place in Zoom and will give you details of how to join in with this at the end of this section.
This morning we're thinking about the theme of peace, and our speaker today, leader of Bridge Church Ipswich, Andy Buttress, is going to be unpacking this in just a few moments.
Before that, we want to spend just a few minutes considering how COVID-19 has affected students who were preparing for exams. Alice is going to share with you how it felt for her when A-levels were cancelled.
When I first heard that A-levels were cancelled, I wasn't really sure whether I should laugh or cry, so in the end I did a bit of both. It was an ironic twist because throughout all of GCSEs and A-levels, we'd always talked about how great it would be if we all got our predicted grades because of some life-changing unforeseen event. But when that unforeseen event did occur in the form of coronavirus, I don't think any of us were quite as ecstatic as we expected to be. Once the initial relief of not having to do A-levels wore off, I definitely felt very deflated and aimless. It was a very peculiar feeling. We'd worked so hard for a year and a half towards this one goal, and suddenly it all felt like it had been for nothing. It was really sad as well that we didn't get a proper send-off. We had a very rushed Leavers Assembly on our last day, which was really nice, but still, I don't think we ever felt like we got to say proper goodbye to our teachers, to the school itself, to all our friends. And I mean, in September, hopefully we'll all be going to uni, but that will be on opposite sides of the country. So it is really sad that we didn't get a proper send-off. However, we are all in the same boat, and everyone's lives are very up in the air at the moment, so I shouldn't be complaining really. And I do think that my faith has helped me through this, although sometimes it is difficult to remember to put Jesus at the centre of everything at the moment, especially as we're not like going to church weekly anymore. He has really helped me with firstly feeling a sense of peace and knowing that all of this is very small compared to what he has planned. And I think that this whole situation has definitely helped me have an appreciation of my family and all of the things that I have been blessed with. And I was very surprised to feel an appreciation of my family because I did think that I would want to murder them within like the first 2 days. But that hasn't quite been the case. So I am very grateful for them, and I'm grateful for everything that I've been given. And even though this is quite a difficult situation, I think that it's very nice that we've all been able to find a great appreciation of the things that we've always had but we might not have focused on before.
Thanks Alice so much for sharing your thoughts. When in a situation like lockdown, which may be making you feel unmotivated and down, it's important to try and remind ourselves of the good things. As Alice said, we can find appreciation for things that perhaps we've always had but never really been grateful for until now.
We'd like you to take a moment to just think of someone who you are really grateful for, especially in this time, and to let them know. Now, whether they're in the room with you or you need to grab your phone and send them a text, we're going to give you a few seconds now just to let that person know how grateful you really are for them, how much we appreciate them.
So now we're going to listen to our message from Andy Buttress on the theme of peace. So settle in, grab your cuppa, get comfy, and let's listen up to what God wants to speak to us this morning.
Good morning. This is the second talk in our mini-series called Living in Lockdown. And this morning we're going to be looking at the subject of peace. I remember a few years ago now, I had the opportunity to go to Africa, to Sierra Leone. And even though it was a great opportunity, I was a little bit fearful by the remit that was given to me. I was told that I would go to Sierra Leone. I'd never been before. I would go with a group of people who I didn't know. I would stay in a place that I didn't know anything about. And this group of people would actually come home before me, and I would stay really with a open-ended ticket. And come back basically when my job was done. So I was a little bit anxious about this. I hadn't said yes yet, and I really didn't know what to do, but I had to make a decision. So one evening I decided to pray about this, and I prayed that I would have clarity about what I needed to do. And then I went to sleep, and during the night I had this, well, I'm not quite sure whether it was a dream or whether it was something else, but I heard in my sleep a voice that simply said, "You'll be okay." And with that, a pervading sense of peace came over me and flowed through me. Remember, I was asleep at this point. And then in the morning, when I woke up, I still had this pervading sense of peace. It was as if what happened during the night wasn't just a dream or something like that. It had actually happened, and I woke up feeling totally different from when I had gone to bed. And these words, "You'll be okay," were still at the forefront of my mind. So after having had my 3 Weetabix and a piece of toast, I said yes to going to Africa. And I've always thought, what actually happened there? What actually happened there? It felt to me as if something was imparted to me, was given to me. This peace was given to me as I slept. And, thinking about today now and the situation we're all in with coronavirus and the anxiety that's in our society at the moment, I mean, what would we give for a sense of pervading peace to come, upon us all at this time? Because, we're all anxious, aren't we, for that we will avoid the coronavirus. And if we have the coronavirus, we're anxious that it will develop into something serious. We're anxious for people who are elderly, perhaps our elderly parents, or people who have underlying health conditions. And perhaps more than that, we're anxious that, the economy and our jobs and our money situation is going to be a real problem too for us, and it scares us, and what would we give for a pervading sense of peace to be just part of our lives all the time? And so this morning I'm kind of asking the question, where does peace come from? Is peace something that is within us already? Is it something that we have as human beings, and we just need to tap it? We just need to harness it or connect with it, to realize, to release. Is it that, or is there more to peace than just having peace within us. There is something very popular called mindfulness at the moment, isn't there? Where we are encouraged to train our minds through breathing techniques, through relaxation, through meditation, to connect with ourselves, with our inner being, and to harness the peace that is within us. And even though I wouldn't recommend all the things that come under the umbrella of mindfulness, there are certain things about it which, are good and worth pursuing. This sense that we need to anchor. We need to anchor with the present moments. That we don't live in the past, and we're not in the future, but we're in the present moment. This place and this space, this time that we're in. This is when we're alive. This is where we are conscious, and we need to ground ourselves, in the now. The realization that we need to accept ourselves and our situations for what they are, and not to kind of wish we were someone else or in a different situation, and not to beat ourselves up, but to be real about how we feel, and to realize that's okay how we feel. To seek to move on from there with a different type of thinking, a more positive type of thinking, a thinking that maybe reframes the problems into something that are possibilities and opportunities, and to have a different outlook, to see things differently, including ourselves, other people, nature, the world in which we live. So there's some good stuff in this whole mindfulness thing. But the question I'm really asking this morning is that all there is in as regards peace? Is there something else? Is mindfulness sufficient for what we need? Is peace just within us, or is there something without of us? If that's a proper phrase, something external, which we need to find. I'd like to look this morning at some writings of a man called John, who wrote about Jesus. And the passage I'm about to read is after Jesus was crucified. There were rumours that he had come back to life again. And so I'm picking it up in John chapter 20, where it says, on the evening of the first day of the week, when the disciples were together with the doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." And after he said this, he showed them his hands and side, and the disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. So here we have a situation where the disciples are in lockdown. They are in lockdown because of fear. They realize that the very people who crucified Jesus, the Jewish religious leaders, the Roman authorities, would probably come after them next. So they had their doors closed and locked, and they were in fear of what was going to happen next. And then all of a sudden, Jesus appears in the room. He hasn't been hiding behind the sofa when everybody else came in and then sort of sprung up and said, "Ta-da, here I am." And he didn't have a spare key, as far as I'm aware, or sneak in through the upstairs window. Jesus just appears. And he appears in their midst and says, "Peace be with you." And that is maybe what we need to hear this morning. Jesus saying to us, "Peace be with you. Now, Jesus here, I think, is fulfilling something of a promise that he made earlier on before he was crucified. John records earlier on in his writings that Jesus said, "Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Do not be afraid." So what kind of peace is this? Now, Jesus, I think, was probably speaking in Aramaic at the time, the spoken language to his disciples. And the word for peace in Aramaic is shalomah, very close to the Hebrew word shalom, which is in itself very close to the Arabic word salam. And all these words have the same root meaning, and the root meaning is really to do with a wholeness, a whole of life peace, a wellness, we might say today. But more than this, in Jesus' words here, he says, "My peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you." And again in Aramaic, the word for leave is shvach, which actually means divorce or separation. So what Jesus here is saying is something of his own peace would leave him, would separate from him, would divorce from him, and go to the disciples. This is rather unique, isn't it? This peace is a peace of Jesus. It is Jesus himself. He is giving his own self, his peace, to the disciples. It's not coming from within the disciples. They're not tapping into their own sort of reservoirs of peace. No, Jesus is giving peace to them. So we can say that Jesus' peace is given, not achieved. It's imparted, it's not of ourselves. And it's personal, not just a concept. And we can also say, if you like, that it's not normal, it's paranormal. Just as Jesus appeared in that room to the disciples and said, "Peace be with you," walking through walls, if you like, to be there, so his peace that he gives us by his Spirit is paranormal, is supernatural. And this idea of peace makes the Jesus peace, the Christian peace, unique. It's not found in any other philosophy or religion. This idea that Jesus imparts himself is unique. If I can go back to Africa, I had a meeting at the other side of Freetown, and to get back I had to take a taxi, and I took this taxi, which was an absolute rust bucket. I've seen better rust buckets in better condition. It was absolutely awful. And we were travelling through the streets of Freetown, and it was boiling hot, so I had the window open, and then we got stuck in a traffic jam. And as soon as the hundreds and thousands of people on the street realised that in this stationary car was a white man, it seemed to attract everybody to my window. There were people putting their hands through the window, sticking their heads through the window, asking and begging for money. And the only thing I could do was wind up the window. I was beginning to feel quite panicky, really. And then the taxi began to sort of judder and jar and begin to break down. And I was beginning to think, oh my goodness, and this, I could feel this sense of panic setting in. Earlier on in the morning, I'd been just sitting on my veranda overlooking the sea and contemplating God's presence and those words, "It will be okay." So in that taxi, I prayed, and I can remember I just felt that I wasn't alone, and the peace of God began to replace the panic. It was not something that was kind of coming up from me. I was panicking. It was something that I felt God was imparting to me, imparting to me. And I will never forget that experience. What is peace, and where does it come from? Well, I think what we've just learned is that real, true peace, the ultimate peace, comes from a person. It comes from Jesus himself. We have a good friends who live in a Welsh valley, and Alison is a psychotherapist, and she does in her work with young people use some of those mindfulness techniques. And she would say that God has created us to be more peaceful than we actually are. And to some degree, we do need to harness and have a right mind, to be peaceful people. But she would also say that the source of peace, for she is a Christian, she would say that the source of peace is the Prince of Peace. That Jesus gives us himself. He gives us his peace. And it is in Jesus that we find true peace for ourselves, in relation to others, and also in peace with God himself. So remember, Jesus himself said these words to anyone who would seek him and follow him. Peace I leave with you. Peace I give to you. I do not give as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid.
Amazing. Thanks, Andy.
Plenty to think about there, and we'll be having some time to reflect on all of that in the second part of our time together this morning that we've already mentioned, the part we're calling Life Source. So we'd really love you to join us for that later on.
So, for the last few minutes of part one of our time together this morning, we caught up with the brilliant, the amazing, encouraging and hilarious guy Derek, part of Bridge Church, just to find out how his week's been and what all this peace stuff really means to him.
So, question number one. Who are you and what do you do?
Okay, I'm Derek. I'm a social worker by trade, and at the moment I work in children's services in Suffolk County Council. My role is early help service manager, which really means not a lot to most people. What I do is that I spend my time managing a number of different teams. I manage children's centres, I manage health visitors, school nurses, and early help teams, which have got family support practitioners and young people's workers. So we work with children and young people 0 to 19 and try and help them to help themselves.
Quite a diverse role by the sounds of it.
It's never dull. It's one of the things I really love about the role is that there is always something happening, always something on the go and a new challenge. And the really good thing is that I'm in a very blessed position because I'm sort of overseeing all this stuff. My main strengths are my teams, who are amazing. Some really, really talented and passionate people, and that's what really keeps me going.
Wow. So where would you say you find peace in all of this?
I think if you'd asked me a couple of weeks ago, or just before the lockdown, I would have said that I find peace in spending time quietly on my own, listening to music. At the moment, that's not the case because there's so much going on and so many online activities, so many things that are in your face. I actually find at the moment, the time I find most peaceful and where I find my peace is when I go out for a walk. I tend to take myself off for at least a half-hour walk every day just to try and give myself some space. And it means that I'm away from the family because obviously being in lockdown, you're in each other's face all the time. And it gives me the opportunity to listen to, usually to some sort of podcast or some app. I have something called Erland syndrome, which means that I find reading and using screens really, really stressful and really difficult and tiring. So actually listening to things rather than actually having to read them or having to spend time with computer screens is so much better.
So, may I ask, what are you listening to at the moment? Anything for us to be aware of?
Well, one of the things that I'm doing is I'm using Nicky Gumbel's Bible in 1 year.
Wow.
A really good app. You've got Nicky Gumbel talking about bits of the Bible, which is really interesting, and you've got David Suchet, the renowned actor, actually reading you the Bible. I confess that I've tried numerous times to read the Bible from start to finish, and I generally get into the middle of Leviticus and give up. It's difficult. So this is really, really good. Most days they last about half an hour. It gives you the opportunity to really listen to it, and if your mind wanders, that's okay as well.
Fantastic. So look, it's really difficult times at the moment. So it's kind of a twofold question. What difference does Jesus make to you in your profession and also living in lockdown?
I suppose for me, the really good thing about having Jesus in my life is that I deal with lots of very difficult situations, lots of issues that families are having, lots of very challenging situations. It can be domestic abuse, it can be drug use, it can be all sorts of things, all the things you read about in the newspapers or on the news reports. And sometimes you feel really, really helpless. And I'm sending my teams out into these different situations and difficult situations. And at the moment, there's that big debate about should we be giving them PPE? Should they be going and visiting families? But we know that the families need it. We know the families need the food banks. We know that they need to be seen. So you can feel really helpless. But I know that in the midst of all this, that I can and do spend time praying for my workers, praying for the families, praying for the overall situation. And I really feel that that makes a difference because actually I've seen some amazing things happen. Situations that I thought, oh, this is going to be really difficult. We're going to have to get the police involved. And actually things have calmed down, or the families have come up with ideas that are really, really good. Or my skilled workers have gone in and said, why don't you try this? And actually feeling that I can pray for them is a real strength for me. And it also helps me to clear my head and to be really focused in what I'm doing and what I want to achieve for the families. And in lockdown, well, it's a lot harder to actually be able to get out there, to see people. And I know there's lots of need out there. I'm allegedly a key worker, so it enables me to go out more than some people. But actually, there's a real amount of need out there, and to pray for the people around us, and to be able to, when you know that someone's having a really bad day, to just hold them up in prayer is so important. It makes me feel that I actually can do something. I may not be able to go and visit someone. I may not be able to provide all the answers, but I can hold them in prayer, and that really means a lot.
Amazing, thank you. Well, look, Derek, thank you so much for spending some time answering our questions. We really pray God blesses you and strengthens you throughout your coming weeks. Thanks, Derek.
Thank you.
Thanks, Derek. Really interesting. Sadly, that brings us to the end of our first part of this morning.
We hope you've enjoyed being with us so far, and we'd love you to join us now in Zoom for the second part of the session, which will have more of a prayer and singing focus.
If you'd like to join us, simply drop us a private message on Facebook, Bridge Church Ipswich, and we'll send you the login details that you need. If you'd rather not be seen, not a problem, you can leave your video off, but we'd love to see you at the second part of our service time this morning in Zoom.
So please now go and log into Zoom, come and say hi, make yourself another cuppa, and be ready to start the second part of our session in Zoom at 11:20. See you in just a few moments.